Hello, everybody. Welcome back. This is Beyond the Saga. I am your co-host, David Cottingham, along with Hannah Burr. How are you today, Hannah?
I am doing all right. How are you doing?
Doing very good. Doing very good. And we are back again, diving into all the stories that are beyond the Skywalker saga. That's what we do on this particular show.
Mm-hmm.
There's all kinds of stories out there in the books, in the comics, in the games, and those are the things that we are talking about here. Just to kind of quick recap on some of the things we have done, we've dived into the first series of the Vader comic. We just wrapped that up recently. Got a lot of positive feedback on that. A lot of people diving into that. And then we've dived into Jedi Fallen Order. We've talked about the first couple books of Thrawn, which we plan on finishing that here shortly. Dark Disciple, Queen's Peril. I mean, we've dived into a lot of stories, Hannah, so far. You know?
We absolutely have. It's definitely been a journey.
It has been. And so we're going to continue on this episode where we are going to dive into the first volume series of the Star Wars comic line. Just simply Star Wars. And this came out back in 2015 after the purchase and the acquisition of the comic line from Dark Horse. Marvel got the Star Wars line back and they started releasing Star Wars comics in January of 2015. So this issue series started going on, and what we're going to do, what we do mostly on these comic reviews and discussions, is we look at them as volumes. So we are going to be talking about volume 1, which is this book right here, and it's called Skywalker Strikes. Skywalker Strikes. So this, yeah, so very appropriate, right? This collects the first 6 issues that came out. The series is written by Jason Aaron and illustrated by John Cassaday. So you can purchase this as a volume set. I think they have like 12 issue volumes as well, but we go by the trade paperbacks here. So first 6 issues of this series. The beauty of this thing, if you go back to listen to our Vader topics and discussions, this series runs parallel, right? Takes place literally right after the first Death Star gets destroyed. And what this comic series is filling in is the gap between A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back. So the 3-year gap. So this is it's a pretty long series. I think it's 75 issues. So we will do our best to get through all of them in the coming months. So Hannah, first off, of course, as we do all the time, your first impressions and your thoughts on these 6 issues of this series.
Well, first off, if you're talking anything that has to deal with the original saga, oh, heck yes. Let's dive in, please. And all of these different pieces, it adds more to the puzzle that you didn't know you needed, and adds more to the story. I think with this, we definitely get a better feeling of where Luke is emotionally and mentally, because, you know, he's been hit with so many different conflicting feelings and moments, and you definitely see so much of his father in him, especially when it comes to his temper. So you can definitely see Skywalker shining through there.
Right.
I think the other thing is you mentioned earlier the parallels, and they start right off the bat. We immediately see Boba Fett at work trying to get the information for Vader. And as we mentioned in the Vader talks, that's how he found out who Luke Skywalker was before we even get to Empire Strikes Back. So he knows fairly early on, and that starts his plan and his journey. So there's a lot of parallels both regarding the character and also regarding the story. Also, I live for Leia and Han's banter. I just live for it. So there are a lot of different aspects, a lot of really, really cool parallels, and we can get into them a little later. But overall, I just think I can't wait to continue going through, and I'm so glad there are so many issues, because there is a huge time gap between the two, and there's so much. We get to see how Han, Leia, and Luke especially all grow together and all become so close that Han's willing to once again risk his life to save Luke in Empire Strikes Back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very good points. Yeah, I think I'm with you. I think I never knew how much I needed that story between the movies until I started reading this. And for anybody out there watching or listening to us, it does feel very much, it puts you right back into that situation. And, you know, the story of how Vader finds out it's his son, and the journey now that we're following on how Luke gets to where he was destroying the Death Star to where he was at the beginning of Empire, which, as we'll talk about, I'm sure, is a fairly long journey, because you got to think, in 3 years, how much has he actually changed, you know, or how much has he actually learned? Because, you know, we know that he hasn't actually properly trained until he finds Yoda in Empire Strikes Back. So what is he trying to do in this time, during this time? That's what this series really, really hits on, I think. And then, of course, like you said, I think you really get a sense of what the relationship between Han and Leia, how that grows to the point where we get to Empire, where he's willing to do whatever for her, you know. And it makes that scene, you know, on Cloud City just that much more important. So let's dive into a couple things here. I think the one thing that we should start off with is really the state of the rebellion right now, because you know, they destroy the Death Star, which is a great victory, obviously the biggest victory you can imagine, but it doesn't end the war. I mean, that's far from it, right? Because you still have massive legions of Star Destroyers and Stormtroopers and just the Imperial presence throughout the galaxy still, right? They don't have their ultimate weapon, which, to be honest, no one knew about yet, right? I mean, it was kept in secret this whole time. So the rest of the galaxy just doesn't really know what's happening. They just know that there's these band of, well, some think as terrorists, not necessarily rebels. So now the point is, right now, is they do have to find a new base. Like Yavin they know Yavin was their base, so they have to leave Yavin, and they're in the pursuit of that. But what I thought was really cool to know is that they didn't just run and try to find another base. As you see in this issue, they're still attacking. They're still in attack mode. They're going after Imperial installations where they build weapons, they build destroyers, they build stuff. So how surprised were you to find out what the rebellion's strategy is?
I mean, on one hand, it was surprising, but because whenever we get to Hoth in Empire Strikes Back, it almost feels like it's a game of hide and seek.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I wasn't surprised when I read that, because you already took down one of their biggest weapons. Why stop there?
Right.
Keep going. You know, you already have the advantage. You took them by surprise. Now you got a Jedi on your side. You might as well just keep attacking. So for me, yeah, it was surprising, but it also wasn't that surprising. And in some cases, I think Leia is just a very aggressive person.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure, and this kind of plays into when we do Vader Down, where she gets to a point where she recklessly is sending people in to attack Vader. I think that sets her down on that path where she's like, no, we already have him down. And I think this is also, it's not as evident, but I also think she has this subconscious need for revenge after what he did to Alderaan and after what he did to her. So it doesn't surprise me that she's like, nope, let's keep going. And she's leading the troops to keep attacking. But also you have to be smart. And it almost makes you wonder if strategically, if that was the right move or not. What are your thoughts on it?
No, I was pretty surprised because you've it's very much like you just said. You brought up a good point. When you get to Empire, it feels like they've been on the run since they destroyed the Death Star. Like, oh man, they know where we're at. We just need to get out there and just hide and figure out when we're going to strike next. And there's always a question up until Return of the Jedi. Like, what do you strike? How do you strike next? Right? Because there's not a Death Star. What is the strategy? Are you going to invade Coruscant? That's pretty much impossible, right? At the state that they're in now. So what is the strategy? Taking out destroyer after destroyer one at a time, but it seems like this is the strategy, which is destroy, get behind, go to their installations where they're building weapons, where they're building Star Destroyers, where they're building AT-ATs and stuff like that. Let's destroy their manufacturing, and then let's go after what's out there, right? And I think that's a good strategy. And it's, again, you never get that sense when you're watching just the movies. So I was a little surprised by that. I was a little surprised. It was fresh, it was a fresh take on that time in between the movies. So I liked it. I think it's a good idea. I think, but it comes with just massive risk, obviously, because you're putting yourself into these situations where, there's not a lot of rebels. They're gaining. I'm sure they gain more and more each year, but just in this story right here, you could have lost a Luke or a Han or a Leia or a Chewbacca, and it's. But as we know, the story goes that we're not going to lose them.
They would need some explaining to do with Empire Strikes Back.
Yes, they would. So, and that's a side thing that me and Casey have always talked about is some of these stories. Unfortunately, that some characters are safe. Like you can't go into this thinking that any of these characters are going to perish because we know that we know what happens to them. But there's other characters in there that get introduced that you don't know, and for example, Aphra in the Vader series, you don't know what her fate is. But and as I know that there's other characters that do pop up in this comic series. So let's go to another thing you brought up, which is the Boba Fett storyline, right? We know in the Vader series that Vader dispatches a couple of bounty hunters, has a great conversation with a great scene with Jabba, and discusses what he is going to supply versus any kind of negotiation with the Empire. So we heard about, or got hinted in the Vader comic, this confrontation between Boba Fett and Luke, but in this book you actually get to see it. What do you think about that whole thing?
It was so fantastic. I think it really showed Luke's raw power. But I also think, like, don't get me wrong, we always knew Boba Fett was a very cool character and, could do a lot of really unique things. But I don't think we've ever seen the extent of what he can do in the movies alone. And so what this comic does is it really brings the character to life and shows what he can do and how far he is willing to go to get what he needs. Unfortunately. So with Luke getting away, I don't know. It brought some humanness to Boba that we already knew existed, but it was refreshing to see it. But I think it was really, really neat to see this amazing bounty hunter in action, and then also seeing this raw power from Luke, because we know he hasn't had a ton of training with ObiWan.
Right.
Yeah, he's able to do what he can do.
Yes. Yeah, very surprising. Because I mean, granted, this series came out before the sequel trilogy came out, the movies. And we learned from the movies finally, when 789 finally came out, that another person with raw power, right, Rey, learned relatively quickly the power she possessed and didn't have as much training, I feel like, as you would think, because I mean, she did train with Leia eventually. So with 9, you can kind of understand the power about that point. But in this, he's learning himself, and he's got to figure out how to be Jedi without being trained by Jedi. Now, it does bring up a question, and maybe this gets answered in the series later on, because I truthfully, when I was reading this as they were coming out, I stopped somewhere in the 50s. So I haven't actually completed this series. So I'm looking forward to actually getting all the way up until Empire. But it does beg the question to me that why it seems like, because if you remember, he says in this that he thinks he hears Ben's voice. He's not actually sure if he's even hearing his voice, like he did in the trench run, right? It makes you wonder. It seems like in Empire, that's the first time he sees Obi-Wan. Why did it take 3 years for Obi-Wan to finally say, go see Yoda? That's kind of one of my big questions, which I don't know the answer to yet. And maybe we get that answer again at the end of the series. But what is Obi-Wan technically waiting for? Is he waiting for Luke to figure it out on his own at some point? Or, I don't know. I don't know what your thoughts are on that part.
I almost wonder if you need to have a certain level of openness to the Force and a certain level of knowledge to be able to even speak. Like actually actually physically see.
Oh, like for Obi-Wan to manifest himself?
See a ghost or a Force ghost or whatever we want to call them. I almost wonder if that's part of it, because that's an excellent question, because it does seem like that is the first time that he actually sees the ghost of Ben, but maybe he needs to have a certain level of expertise in the Force in order to have that insight. Maybe. Or
it could be Luke has to actually be at a certain level to actually accept that he can see him or something like that. I don't know,
Yeah.
But,
I have no idea.
Yeah, so I've often wondered that, and I've often just chalked it up to be, he was busy trying to move the rebels to find a base and never really had time to, really try to commune with Obi-Wan. But Obi-Wan decided in that situation, if you're going to make it out of this, you need to go train. Finally, it's time. But why? Why 3 years later? I don't know.
Well, maybe it is more of a communing thing. Like, as you develop more of this relationship with the Force ghosts, and as you commune more, they materialize more?
Yeah, maybe. But that's the thing, too, is we don't even know if he's actually been trying to talk to Obi-Wan.
Right.
Obi-Wan's apparently trying to talk to him, but it's like he's questioning whether or not it's actually his own voice in his head or if it is actually Obi-Wan talking to him. So you can clearly see in Empire when he sees Obi-Wan, like he actually is like, Ben, like he's never seen him before since he died. Now again, that may come that may be contradicted once we get through this comic, but I don't think he comes to him in this comic because I think he is truly on his own out there trying to figure out, and that's what he's doing, right? He is looking for answers. He's looking for, how do I become a Jedi? I don't know enough from just learning in the Falcon to carry me into the trials. And so, yeah, he's got to figure something out. So that's what he's doing in this book. He's telling Leia that he's got to figure it out. And in order to truly help the rebellion, he's got to figure this out. I thought that was it's a pretty neat journey that we're going to see, I think.
It is, and it brings along a beautiful parallel where we see him in Return of the Jedi, where he says, I have to go my own way to protect you, but he does it more out of faith. And in this case, in the comics, he's leaving based out of fear.
Yes.
So it'll be very beautiful to just see this whole circle come around.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's interesting you say that, because fear leads to the dark side, right? So what causes him, what prevents him from making that fall, so it's going to be a great journey to go through this book and go through the series and follow this side of the rebellion versus the dark side and the Vader side, which we already did. So it's interesting to follow that because we do know that these, even though they run parallel right now, they do separate. Mm-hmm. And we do follow more of Luke, Han, and Leia. And as we showed through the Vader series, Vader has his own mission and situation. So as we always do while we finish this up, and we've kind of hinted at it, so we could just name those things. But how does this, just so far, how does these 6 issues change your perception actually on the movies, especially obviously 4 and 5? Is it starting to change your perception of those films and that?
I would say it definitely is, in the sense of you start seeing more of these characters, you start seeing more of the journey, and I think it's just going to add more, and it's going to help us connect the dots of what happened in between those years, because I tend to forget actually that there's a huge time gap between 4 and 5. So this will be fantastic to fill in that gap.
Yes, I totally agree. I think again, like I said in the beginning, it's a story that I never thought I needed, but I do need it, and I think it's going to be interesting to see, because when we get, just the foresight that apparently George had when he wrote 4, and then he said, this is 3 years later, I'm going to write this story, and in 3 years, those characters have got to go through so much together. And they do know each other really well by the time you get to Empire. I mean, Han's willing to go sacrifice himself to go save Luke in the snow. He's willing to, get frozen from carbonite to save, Leia and Chewie. And, it's just, it begs the question, why? What has built their relationship so much over these years? And this is that story. And it will ultimately, I think, change how you view Empire again, ultimately, Yeah,
I plan on watching Empire after finish reading all of these.
That's right. That's exactly right. It's going to be really neat, because I may have cheated a little bit a year ago, 2 ago, where I kind of read towards the end of the series to see if it actually literally lines up, and it literally lines up right to Empire. I mean, they're on Hoth setting up the base, so it's like, it really is the gap between the 3 years between. So I suggest anybody that's interested in continuing this, go get this book. In fact, we have the link in this video where you could buy this book, Skywalker Strikes. Go get it on Amazon right now. And yeah, we'll look for more episodes of Beyond the Saga coming up, where we follow this series, as well as other books we're going to be bouncing around. You know, it's not like this is the next several episodes of this is going to be just this series, but we'll be bouncing around, look for other stuff like Thrawn and Aftermath and other comics and stuff like that. So, in fact, I just got Hannah. I just got. I think this is. I think I just got this in the mail today. This is volume 12 of this comic series. So there's 13 volumes, Hannah.
Okay.
13 volumes. So we got one down, 12 to go.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. Thank you, Hannah, for checking us out on this and joining me on this journey. I really appreciate it. I think you've got some great insight on this stuff, and I think it's just incredible to know that there's all these additional stories out there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And thank you. Thanks for taking me with you on this journey.
Absolutely. So, all right. Thank you, everybody. Of course, hit that subscribe button if you want to get all our episodes of Beyond the Saga, as well as Inside the Force and Council Sessions. And we've got an interview series starting up very shortly. Got a couple interviews popping up that are talking to people that are directly involved in these stories, as well as Lucasfilm projects revolving around Star Wars. So coming soon in a couple weeks, actually. So, all right. Thanks, everybody. Take care. For Hannah Burr.
Thank you very much. Be safe out there.
Thank you, everybody. Catch you next time. May the Force be with you.